Hey everyone, for this week's video I thought it would be good to include a DCS Cold War buyer's guide for the new dynamic campaign server that's coming. A lot of people have been hitting me up to get my opinion on Cold War planes and which ones they should get to be able to play on the server. I thought it would be good to kind of sit down and put pen to paper and make a video to get my thoughts out there. If this is your first time here, this channel focuses on multiplayer sim gameplay, so if you're into that, please subscribe. Let me preface by saying that at the time of this recording, I am not associated at all with Eagle Dynamics or any of the module makers, and I don't receive any money from them. So this is a fairly unbiased buyer's guide. With that said, I will say that I do have my biases, which stem from me coming from a World War II background, and I generally like to fly Soviets in DCS jets. Lastly, I would like to say that I am just one person. Other people have different opinions, so compare and contrast my thoughts with others. In general, I want to say that the early Cold War planes feel like a very natural step from World War II. The systems are not overwhelming, and if you are someone who already knows how to fly warbirds, then you should be able to slide into these planes fairly easily. This means that it should not take you weeks to get going in these planes. If you're a seasoned player already, you should be able to get up to speed on these planes in a single session. The way I'm thinking about these planes is in 4 different categories: air-to-air capabilities, air-to-ground capabilities, both determined by the server's weapons restrictions, ease of use, and fun factor. Let's start with the Mig-15 and the F86. These planes are very easy to jump into and can have a high fun factor, but they are not incredibly capable. The Mig-15 has no missiles, while the F86 can carry some basic ones. These planes are for people who want to fly at a technical disadvantage and try to bait people into turn fights. You are flying a Korea-era plane, so you don't really have systems to assist you outside of your gunsight gyro. So basically, if you want to be in a David versus Goliath fight and be David, these planes are for you. I would only recommend these planes for people who already know how to fly and for those that are mostly focusing on air-to-air, as these planes aren't great in air-to-ground. If you can trick an opponent into a turn fight, then you can find success with these planes, and it can be fun to enter these fights, but I would not recommend this as a entry-level plane. Next, the F5, which is one of the main modules of the server. This plane is capable from an air-to-air standpoint, while on air-to-ground it leaves a little bit to be desired. This plane is quite nice to fly as it has great nose authority, good low-speed handling, and pretty good speed. With that said, it suffers from lackluster acceleration. It has a high ease of use, as it probably has one of the best RWRs out of all the planes on the server, and it has a very easy and good gun sight. If you're new to Cold War and want to fly blue, this is the module for you. This plane also has a very high skill ceiling, and there are some players out there who really know how to make this plane dance. So there's a lot of depth, and you can really learn a lot and get really good with this plane. For me personally, as a primarily Soviet player, I don't like flying this plane, but I can see why people do like it, and for me personally, I get hung up on its acceleration, but that's just my personal flying style. It just doesn't mesh well with this plane, but for those that want to play blue, like, this is probably the module that you want to get. The Mig-19 is my personal favorite, but it has some very real limitations. It has lackluster air-to-ground, and it has only the most basic missiles in air-to-air. On top of that, it has very quirky features, like your stores falling off at high speed or at high Gs, no chaffs or flares, and you basically have a functionally useless radar. This plane benefits from a really high thrust-to-weight ratio, and it has an awesome climb rate. The issue is that this plane has very limited systems. You're really going to be relying on your eyes over systems, and you really have bad nose authority. So you really win fights by shaking out people's energy and then delivering a blow to them once they've kind of entered a low energy state. If you are a World War II player that is coming to Cold War and want to play Soviet, I would highly recommend this plane to you. I find that the Mig-19 is one of the easiest planes to get into from my World War II background because it's a very natural step from a basic gunfighter jet into Cold War. In general, I think the Mig-19 is a king at maneuvering, so it is quite easy to hold a winning position in a fight, but because of the lack of modern weapons, it can be really tricky to end fights quickly. Top of that, this Mig-19 has a great canopy, which offers great visibility, so it's pretty easy to keep track of a fight. Next is the Viggen, which is from Heapler. This plane is one of the most capable air-to-ground planes on the entire server. the characteristics of this plane is to fly low and fly fast. There's a lot of depth to this plane, where you could do pre-planned strike missions or just roam and strike targets. On top of that, it can carry many missiles, and it is quite capable from an air-to-air standpoint. Just isn't really easy to maneuver in fights as something like a F5 or a Mig-19. With that said, you have amazing speed, you have a decent sensor, and you have a lot of flares and chaff. If you want to do air to ground, this is the plane for you. It's so capable and so fast enough that you can get away with air to air, but you need to be careful about getting into turn fights, because if you get into a turn fight, you're gonna have a bad time. For the last major module, before we get to the smaller ones, is the Mig-21. This plane can be a terror to your enemies and also to yourself. This plane has an immense amount of depth because it can be so tricky to fly, but once you get used to it, it can be quite capable. It has both IR and radar-based missiles, and it has a surprising amount of air-to-ground weapons it can carry. Flying fast and flying high is the Mig-21's game. People that come from a World II background may find this plane a bit tricky because it is a delta wing and the visibility in the plane is quite poor. This plane is very much actively trying to kill you, so if you mismanage a turn and pull too much AOA, you may find yourself slowing down way too much, and then you're going to be a sitting duck in a fight. I see a lot of people generally recommend the Mig-21 as an entry-level Cold War plane, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I would not recommend the Mig-21 as an entry-level plane. I think that the Mig-19 is actually much easier to enter into if you're new to Cold War. The Mig-21 is far more capable and has a lot more depth than the Mig-19, but you need to find your sea legs first before you really kind of jump into the Mig-21. It's just a lot to handle, and if you aren't used to the Cold War setting, you're probably going to end up lost and confused because of the poor situational awareness that the Mig-21 offers. Going on to the Su-25 and the A-10A, these planes are part of the SC3 pack. They are hugely capable from an air-to-ground standpoint, but there are some considerations. First is that they are not full fidelity modules, so this may be a deal breaker for some people, especially for you in VR. On top of that, they are extremely slow. Yes, they carry a lot of munitions, but they are so slow, and the flight times can be quite long. The good thing is that they are able to carry some air-to-air missiles, so they are not completely defenseless. I think the SC3 pack is a great module pack. It's actually one of my favorite ones because it has so much content, like the Mig-29 and the Su-27s. So I would probably pick up this pack regardless, even if you aren't really planning on flying these planes. The only thing we haven't really covered yet is the L-39 and the C-101. I don't have these modules, so I am nervous to really comment on them. I'll just say that it seems that these things, to me, seem more like novelties, but there are some people that really do fly them and have a lot of fun. So that's really up to you. Pretty much all the other planes do everything else better, but you know, they're there if you want it. If you have any questions about these modules, feel free to leave me a comment below. I just wanted to get this out there as a very just general guide of what their planes, kind of what niche they fit in, and how easy they are to use. If you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing, and I look forward to seeing everyone on the server on launch day. Thank you.